Kenya's repeat presidential election is marked by low voter turnout, protests, and clashes. We'll have a live update from Nairobi. Could an individualized approach be the key to fighting tumors? And Amazon debuts an up-close and personal smart delivery system. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhu in for Vincent Makori, who will join us shortly from Nairobi. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight with Kenya's chaotic and confusing presidential repeat election. Here are the latest developments on today's voting. Kenya's chairman of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, Wafula Chebukati, says that due to delays caused by security problems, voting in several areas, including the opposition stronghold of Kisumu, will be held on Saturday. A Kenyan police source says 3 people have been killed in protests over the election. 1 person was killed in Kisumu County, another in Homa Bay in the west, and the third in Athi River town outside Nairobi. Amid low voter turnout, Thursday's repeat presidential vote has been marred by clashes between police and protesters. Police fired tear gas at demonstrators in Kibera and Nairobi slum as they attempted to place barricades in front of the polling station. Violence also erupted in Kisumu, where dozens of polling stations were closed and election officials were nowhere to be found. Despite the demonstrations and attempts to disrupt the election, some voters remain hopeful the country can come together.
Our hope for the country is that whoever emerges the winner will be able to unite the country, which is already torn apart by politicians and politics of the day.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta on Thursday expressed his feelings on the nation's election process.
Kenya has proved that it is able to go through presidential election nullification, accepted, and given Kenyans another opportunity to get back to the ballot and once again decide on who their leader shall be. Our institutions are maturing, and I believe that that is the path that all of us on the African continent should look forward to.
And as we've mentioned, Kenya's Electoral Commission has pushed back voting in 4 counties to Saturday due to security issues. The postponement includes the western city of Kisumu. Reporter Muhammad Yusuf is in Kisumu and filed this report on Thursday's activities.
Security forces clash with youths blocking roads to disrupt voting in the opposition stronghold of Kisumu. Most of the city appear to be observing calls to boycott the election. Polling stations were closed.
The change I'm getting is because of the demonstrations around and profiling of officials. They are getting threats, and most of them they are shying to come, fearing for their lives.
Some voting materials were being delivered hours after voting had commenced in the rest of the country.
I turned up at my polling station to vote, but then I found the center closed, and therefore I waited, and there were no materials and there were no election officials.
I went to my polling station. There was no one there. I'm so happy.
Today, we have not taken part in the election. We cannot vote for a corrupt government.
Unrest continued throughout the day in pockets of the city and in other parts of western Kenya. Tensions are expected to rise as the results of Thursday's nationwide election are announced. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Kisumu, Kenya.
And as we continue our Kenya Election Day coverage, Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori has more polling news from Nairobi, where voter turnout was generally low.
Well, Esther, we experienced, or rather witnessed, a really low turnout around the city of Nairobi, the different polling stations. In fact, so surprisingly, even in some areas where we expected more people, especially places that are considered the strongholds of the ruling party, Jubilee. That was what we were trying to establish why. But officials gave various explanations, including the weather in some places and others They explained that perhaps because people were aware there won't be any serious crowding of the polling stations, and therefore they could come later on. And so they spread out throughout the day. That was at least the explanation by some officials as to why either there were no lines or the lines were extremely thin. The truth is, though, countrywide, if you look at even local reports, voter turnout has been very, very low on this day.
No queues. A few people trickling to the various polling centers in and around Nairobi. A rare sight for a presidential election any other time in Kenya. Well, this is a first one for the country. A presidential rerun and a boycott by the main opposition. Here at Kilimani Primary School polling center, voters started coming in early in the morning at 6 to cast their votes. But as you can see, as compared to August the 8th, it is not exactly a very busy day. And this has been witnessed throughout the city of Nairobi and other parts of the country where voter turnout has been very, very low. We spoke to some of the election officials here at Kilimani Primary School.
Okay, I would say it was a bit different. Okay, the turnout, I said it was very low in the morning, very low. And even now, you wouldn't say that it is a normal turnout. It's still slow. Yeah, so we are just hoping by the end of the day, maybe it will have improved. Yeah, but it is slow. Slower compared to the other times.
This polling center is in the main opposition leader Raila Odinga's stronghold. Mr. Odinga withdrew from the rerun election and called on his supporters not to vote and instead stay at home. It was evident they heeded his call, at least of not voting. Polling officials told me that a few voters believed to be supporters of the ruling coalition Jubilee did occasionally come up and cast their votes. For those who participated, the process was fairly quick and some said simple. Few observer teams that made the rounds seemed to have little to observe. Some election officials seemed either bored or tired as they waited for people to serve. I caught up with Nairobi County Senator Sakaja Johnson and asked him if he is concerned this election could leave Nairobi a divided city.
I choose to focus on the issues in my kind of politics. And the people of Nairobi are the most enlightened voters in this country. And they've been able to see the difference between leadership that is anchored on tribe and all of those, divides, those imaginary lines we draw in this country, and leadership that is focused on issues. And similarly, I've been serving and I commit to serve people from across the political divide. Politics will come once in 5 years. Then there we can say you're this party and you're this party.
One thing that was apparent is the heavy security presence around the polling centers. Batons, police patrolled, some stood guard, while others sat by the election officials. In some parts of the country, voting was postponed due to security issues. However, countrywide, many are still wondering what the results of this presidential rerun will look like. But even more importantly, the implications they'll have for Kenya in the coming days and far into the future.
Now, standing by Nairobi is Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori. Vincent, you've mentioned about some of the issues why there was such a low voter turnout. But if you can look at Kibera slums, which is quite a place where there's so many people, some of them coming from other parts of the country, what seems to have been the problem there, because there was serious protests in that area?
You see, although Raila Odinga told his supporters not to protest on this polling day, the truth is that some of his supporters came out to the streets to barricade the polling stations and also somehow intimidate any other person who wanted to go to the polling centers to cast their vote. So we know, like in Kibera, there are communities like Kikuyus and Nubians who are not necessarily all in the NASA coalition, which now has become a resistance movement. So I was told by some of the election officials that there were people who are having a hard time getting closer to the polling stations because thousands of youth came out and barricaded some of those areas, or kind of just intimidated by their mere presence, those who may have wanted to come to cast their votes. But a few did come through, or at least go around the polling centers to come through the areas where there was some police and other security officials, and there was quite some action in Kibera. Tear gas was lobbed at people, including journalists, including our own Jill Craig. She was right in the middle of some area where tear gas became a major kind of action there, trying to push back some of those people who were protesting on the streets, or rather barricading the streets.
Vincent, keep your eyes on the ground. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori reporting live via Skype from Nairobi. Now, Kenya's economy is expected to grow next year by 5%, down from a projected 6%, according to the International Monetary Fund. The slowdown has been largely blamed on the election crisis. Here again is reporter Mohammed Yusuf.
Kisumu residents are in a rush to purchase the little food that is available in the streets. Commodities are scarce and business is not doing well. Weekly political protests are being blamed.
There is not much business since demonstrations began, because on the demonstration day there is no business. We are also forced to join the protest, and the police are here until the evening, and the day ends without making a cent.
Opposition strongholds like Kisumu have seen a series of protests demanding that members of Kenya's Electoral Commission resign. Some of the demonstrations have turned violent. The protests have cleared streets in Kisumu, the biggest town in western Kenya.
You cannot come. Here it is a contingent of policemen wherever we are here. Because it was after peaceful demonstration, everybody was being chased within the town. Even if you are just a passersby, you are being tear gas, and yet you are not a protester.
Shop owners could be seen idling and chatting as some lucky ones welcome a few walk-in customers.
Business is normal. When a protest begins, we close the shop and join them. We are fighting for our rights so that we can have a good business opportunity. Without rights, business won't be as usual.
The political uncertainty has prompted the Kenyan stock market to fall since September 1st, when the Supreme Court annulled President Uhuru Kenyatta's victory in the August election. Kisumu business leaders fear they may lose employers to neighboring towns.
We have businesses who are already contemplating moving out of Kisumu to the nearing areas where there are no demonstrations, and relocating their godowns to those places so that they can continue with business. And we believe this is going to affect Kisumu greatly.
For the time being, the businesses remain, but the demonstrations go on. The newly elected governor of the region has a daunting task to attract investors if and when the political uncertainty ends. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Kisumu, Kenya.
Turning now to other news, the United States says it has lost trust in South Sudan's government for fueling the country's civil war, and it must bring peace or risk losing support from Washington. The remarks were made Wednesday by the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, after visiting with South Sudanese President Salva Kiir.
I didn't come here to talk. I came here to basically say the time for action is now. We're not waiting anymore. We need to see a change, and we need to see it right away. And there's nothing that they can say at this point. We have lost trust in the government, and we now need to regain that trust. And the only way to regain that trust is through the actions of taking care of all of the people. President Kiir is the president of everyone, not just one tribe, not just one group. And in order to be a leader, you have to be willing to take care of all of your people. And so it was a harsh message. But on the other side, he listened, he accepted, and he promised that we would see changes.
Haley arrived in the Democratic Republic of Congo late Wednesday, the last leg of her Africa trip, which has taken her to Ethiopia and South Sudan. Now, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres continues to call on the international community to show solidarity in helping the crisis-torn Central African Republic chart a new future while warning against religious divide. Guterres, who is visiting the Central African Republic this week, wants the UN Security Council to send an extra 900 troops to protect civilians in the country. He also reiterated the need to strengthen the UN peacekeeping mission known as MINUSCA to better protect the population. Guterres has met with President Faustin Touadera in Bangui and is pledging to make UN peacekeeping more efficient. There have been several allegations of sexual abuse committed by the UN peacekeepers in the CAR country, and the United Nations says it has been working to address the issue. Now, the economic impact of mass action in Togo is being felt by many residents in the capital Lomé, saying they are unable to make sales. Opposition activists say they oppose a constitutional reform proposed by President Faure Gnassingbé, which would allow him to rule the West African country until 2030. In a bid to curb demonstrations, the government has banned marches and mass protests on weekdays. Criticism of Gnassingbé's government by foreign powers and other countries from the West African regional body ECOWAS has been muted. The Gambia and Togo are the only countries in the 15-nation ECOWAS bloc without time limits on mandates. ECOWAS sought to make this law across the region in 2015, but Togo and Gambia voted against it, although Gambia is now changing its constitution. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Coming up, how genomic sequencing could help treat cancer patients. Stay with us. And it's time now for our health report. And joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with new information on suppressing viruses. Lino.
Hello, Esther. Researchers in Scotland have discovered a protein that can stop viruses from developing. The protein is called HIRA. 3 years ago, researchers reported that HIRA could suppress the uncontrolled division of cells that causes cancer. Now working at the University of the West of Scotland, the scientists have established the same HIRA protein combats viruses too. They established that the HIRA protein has a role to play in the antiviral fight. They did it by using specially bred mice capable of having the HIRA protein knocked out of their genome. HIRA is present in greater or lesser amounts in every human cell. It increases as people get older. The researchers say the trick in using it to fight disease may lie in increasing HIRA levels in human cells. They add that it is going to take some time before this work can move out to the lab and into clinics and hospitals. Now, doctors in the U.S. are increasingly employing a new approach when treating tumors, thanks to the new technology of genomic sequencing. It allows them to look at each patient and their danger as an individual and develop a customized therapy. The new approach is showing some promising results. Here's VOA's George Buttigieg.
Instead of the traditional invasive and painful method for retrieving tissue suspected of being malignant, the new method, called liquid biopsy, can reliably find tumor cells in the patient's blood. But just looking at those cells does not tell the whole story.
So the new way to get a diagnosis is to look deep in the cell and understand precisely what made it into a tumor. And that's genomic sequencing.
In practical terms, genomic sequencing involves making a detailed analysis of the patient's genome, looking for mutations that cause the uncontrolled growth of cells into tumors. Once the results are available, doctors comprising a so-called tumor board gather to discuss the best approach to treating that specific patient. The traditional therapy would have involved surgery and chemotherapy or radiation. But after genomic sequencing, cancer patient Alison Cairns was treated only with 2 drugs.
In about 8 weeks from a treatment, the imaging showed about 50% reduction of a tumor. And that remains to be continued to shrink gradually after the first reduction over the past year now, almost a year now.
Some oncologists caution that the biology of cancer is very complicated and that there's still a lot to learn about it.
We've actually learned in some of these situations where the mutations existed in the genetic analysis and a drug was available to match that genetic mutation. In those patients, it didn't work.
Others feel much more optimistic, saying they expect tumor profiling to become standard for all cancer patients. So do patients who have experienced improvement in their health.
Boy, if you can get the DNA testing and there's a match for it, I'd really highly recommend that because it works so well.
George Putich, VOA News, Washington.
The United Nations Population Fund recently released its State of the World Population 2017 report. The document, entitled, quote, "Worlds Apart, Reproductive Health and Rights in an Age of Inequality," highlights, among other things, the disparities that exist among women in developing countries' access to reproductive health care, partly due to their economic status.
In most developing countries, the poorest women have the least power to decide whether, when, or how often to become pregnant. The poorest women also have the least access to quality care during pregnancy and childbirth. This inequity has lasting repercussions for women's health, work life, and earnings potential, and for their contribution to their nation's development and to the elimination of poverty.
And the editor of the report, Richard College, adds that reduction in funding for the UN Population Fund has a direct impact on women and adolescent girls in developing countries. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @LenorMoudou. Esther, back to you.
Thanks, Leno. Be sure to watch Leno Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Would you let a courier enter your empty house? Amazon hopes the answer is yes. We'll be right back.
You've just joined us. I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. Kenyans vote in a repeat election that has polarized the nation and is likely to be fiercely disputed in the absence of opposition leader Raila Odinga, who's boycotting. We stay in Kenya, where at least one person is shot dead during clashes with police as demonstrators seek to block Kenya's presidential rerun in the western city of Kisumu. In South Africa, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba says the country faces mounting debt and a widening fiscal deficit as he cuts South Africa's growth forecast in a pessimistic midterm budget statement. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
This is a country that I chose to become a citizen. I didn't have to become a citizen. I chose to become a citizen.
I feel like America gave me an opportunity to pursue my passion as an artist.
I really believe that clean eating is a way to a more successful life, or a happier life, if you want to put it that way.
One of the things that helps me wake up every morning is doing better, being better.
We grew up poor, and so I'm always focused on helping the working class be able to have a more comfortable lifestyle.
I'm passionate about doing justice every day. I oftentimes say that justice is a verb, not a noun. You know, I believe in action and moving the ball forward.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. The makers of a child car seat say they've used small aircraft technology to create the first safe airbag for babies. Airbags explode too violently to be considered safe for infants, and they're usually removed from cars when baby seats are installed. One of the biggest obstacles facing airbag manufacturers when it comes to babies is the size of the car. According to the makers, the new airbag makes it one of the safest car seats available for children between 4 and 15 months, although it is still not certified in the US and Australia. Next up, France is running short of butter, with some supermarket shelves sitting empty and the price of croissants on the rise. The government is coping with a big headache just as it tries to make the food chain fairer for farmers. The shortage is the result of falling milk production and rising butter demand globally, with the emerging markets buying more of it and consumer attitudes towards the spread more positive. Soaring prices and reduced dairy supplies have put strain on producers and food businesses, with some halting deliveries and considering passing higher costs onto retailers and shoppers. And finally, tech titan Amazon is taking delivery to a new level. It is called Amazon Key, and here's how it works. The driver arrives and scans your package, which automatically sends an alert to your phone and a signal to the Amazon cloud that unlocks the smart lock on your front door. At the same time, a security camera mounted in your home begins rolling, so you have a record of the whole thing. The optional service kicked off this week in 37 cities around the US, and that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa, between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to